Hey Pat, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, John. Yeah, I'm good, man. You?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Thank you so much for jumping onto the potty. And as we were saying before,
No problem.
I'm not too sure how this is going to go, and whether we've still got the skills of podcasting, or we've still got the skills of conversation, talking to people, because it's been a while, But here we are. We're into it. Man, what I'd like to do for this little chat is just to go over you and just your experiences with jiu-jitsu, and seeing how you came into it, and we'll go from there, and hopefully we'll get a nice little story going. So Pat, tell us more about your background. Where does Pat come from?
Well, Pat comes from Penrith, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, born and raised in Penrith. So I lived there probably, the vast majority of my life. And that's, where I obviously first got involved with martial arts. It's like around Penrith, it's always been like a lot of different martial arts academies and gyms and things. And obviously those have changed over the years as, different, I guess it's whatever like zeitgeist of the time. Like, it used to be, Taekwondo gyms everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Because Taekwondo was huge. Like it was just this like massive thing that everyone did Taekwondo back in the day. And yeah, that's what I started with. There was at my primary school, they used to teach Taekwondo in the little hall assembly area they had there at Kingswood South Primary School. And yeah, a friend of mine did it, and I'd always wanted to do martial arts because I grew up watching Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and seeing like Bruce Lee and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, Jean-Claude Van Damme was definitely the one. Like, once you've seen Bloodsport, even now, it's just like, now it's in that so bad it's good territory. But back then, you used to think it was like the best thing ever. It was the coolest thing out.
That's the Rocky So you look at I watch the Rocky movies now, and I think as a kid, like, what was I thinking? Why did I love them so much? But I understand.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and it's good because you've kind of got that thing that, like leads you into something. A lot of people like, that's how they get into boxing is, through Rocky. And, I saw Taekwondo and I'm like, oh yeah, that's like heaps of kicking, and Van Damme does heaps of kicking. So I'm like, yeah, all right, that's, that'll be good. So let's give it a crack. And yeah, that was where I started off. And then, I did that for a few years.
How old were you?
Was never.
Taekwondo?
Probably. I think I probably started that when I was around 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So started that, and and I was never at school. I was never terribly athletic. Like I just wasn't really that interested in sports. Like I used to muck around with my friends and everything, but I was probably a little bit more on the nerdy side back in school. Like I was really big on reading. So all I wanted to do was just read books. And that was because I came from, like, my dad was really quite big into, athletics. Like he liked his sports growing up. Like he played pretty much everything, cricket, like footy, golf, the whole, all the sort of stock standard sort of ball sports that he was quite into. And that, funnily enough, ended up being more like my sister. Like she was really big into, say, like touch footy and everything in school. She actually was in like reps and things like that. And I kind of just had this pull in a different direction. And then, that led me to martial arts because I just wanted something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think luckily, being that I started off being not terribly athletic, but I think that there was some maybe, I guess, hereditary athleticism there, because eventually as I started doing stuff, like I found that if I tried something, like I, could pick it up reasonably quickly.
Yeah, it's surprising. It's surprising that you weren't athletic as a kid? Because you look at you now and you're not uncoordinated at all. Like you seem like it comes pretty natural to you. So it's pretty surprising to
Yeah,
hear that you're more of a bookworm than a
that's
sporty guy.
oh definitely, and that's like that's my theory on it. That like it was sort of there. It was just like hidden. Like it was just this in my DNA. It was there, but I just hadn't accessed it yet. Um, and yeah, like I think like a lot of people as well. You go through school, and especially being not athletic terribly. Got picked on a little bit, like nothing too crazy, but um, you know, I think that's what sort of led me to wanting to be able to defend myself, then wanting to also like gain that self-respect as
Mm.
well, and that discipline from martial arts. It's especially back in the day. Even in those like old school movies, like even if you watch like the Karate Kid and everything, that was a big part of, especially around that time. The karate and all that, taekwondo and all martial arts as a whole. It's got that culture of discipline and of self-development and that sort of like sense of honor and things like that. And that was a really big appealing thing as well, because like being like a bit of a bookworm that liked reading, and you read these stories of usually most fictional stories tend to follow the archetype. You look at like Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, um, and all these things that makes a hero is that like sort of discipline, that honorable nature and all this kind of stuff that that's appealing in martial arts, because really, like when we look at it, we all want to kind of be the good guy. We all want to be Van Damme, like saving the day.
That's interesting. So you reckon the appeal towards like discipline and honor, if you like, is that a part of wanting to be the good guy? Like what drives people to that? Because I that's one thing I love about karate and all the martial arts for that matter. The fact that whether or not it's a different conversation, whether they're effective, whether if you compare all of them against each other, which one's more effective and not. But I think people get a little bit too focused on that. Like it's important, but I don't think it's the whole picture, because I think karate and
Mm.
taekwondo and all the other arts give you so much more in addition to the skills of combat. So like discipline and committing yourself, and being and understanding the process and being patient with yourself, and the arts of learning is all a part of like any martial art really, and the process of the martial arts. So what do you think, what was it? Elaborate a bit more on what attracted you to that.
So I think I think the part of it that really attracted me is a little bit like the singular nature of it. It's a very personal journey for people, and that's something that I never really got from like team sports, and that's why I was never terribly interested in that, because it might seem like inherently selfish, I guess, that you're like, no, I just want to focus on me. Like I don't care what anyone else is doing. But I mean, the self-development aspects of that, and I think really wanting to become something more than myself, or or to strive to something like like a better version of myself, I guess would be the better way of saying it. Yeah, I guess that's one of the real big appeals as well, because that's, I guess, to go back to the movie aspect of it, you look at like the Karate Kid, and that's that's Danny when he meets up with Mr. Miyagi and he's getting picked on, and then he gets these karate skills, and he it sort of enhances his confidence in himself, and and that's a huge part of it for people, I think, like especially with jiu-jitsu, like that jiu-jitsu is really, really hard for people, like especially if they come in like having never done any kind of physical activity, and then all of a sudden they've got this like sweaty person on top of them. And that'll freak most people out on like the on the best of days. but then when you get through that and like they become comfortable with that level of sort of closeness and also like the roughness of it as well, because you know when you've got someone, especially someone bigger than you in side control or mount, they're just suffocating underneath. You really kind of learn about yourself and what you're capable of as well, and then and more often than not, that capability is vastly more than what you initially thought it was.
Yeah. Wow. I guess like the thing that fascinates me is with regards to what attracts people to the martial arts is maybe it's got to do, I don't think it's selfish at all. I'm quite the same. Like I played team sports and I enjoyed them, but I don't know, it's just a matter of there's so many dynamics between teammates and you know, like I guess working together in a team is really important. But and in jiu-jitsu and in martial arts, you're still working with a team, but as you said, the process is a lot more personal. So maybe that's a bit of like that's the equalizer, because the extroverted, wouldn't say boisterous, but really confident, excitable people don't really have that need to look within, perhaps. Whereas if you're a little bit more of a bookworm, if you're a little bit less athletic, if it doesn't come as natural to you, and you like to keep to yourself, maybe out of shyness, but maybe it's just your nature as well, then something like the martial arts can kind of bring you up to that point where you are more confident in yourself and you do have the skills and you do have the abilities to match it with anyone, you know, like, because that's and especially with jiu-jitsu, learning leverage is going to help you get to that point. So even if you are smaller or weaker, you no longer have to eat the shit of the of the bully who's bigger and stronger. Like you do have a say now, you have a voice, because you know something like like jiu-jitsu, for example. So yeah, man, that's really interesting. And I think also, as you say, being underneath side control, it's not a natural place to be. And there's so much adversity in there, and you can't convince yourself that you're not there or that, you know, you can escape, because it's like, okay, if you think you can escape, go for it. And you can't, you know, like, and before you know it, you might be tapping out to the pressure, like, oh my, just leave me alone, get me out of here. So I think to your point, man, like it's like the adversity that you find underneath the side control that helps you level up as a person.
Definitely.
That's really
It's
cool.
and that's the thing with, like, you know, I think martial arts as a whole, it's just, you know, obviously jiu-jitsu does it in a very specific way, but any kind of I think it's the arduous nature of martial arts and that very personal self-improvement thing that you know, it's a crucible in which you're refining yourself, and no matter what it is you do, like, you know, obviously you mentioned before, you know, there's the never-ending argument of everyone trying to say, like, no, like my style is more effective than your style, and this, that, and, you know, all the politics of it. And you know, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, if the person gets out of it what they need, then that's fine. Like, it's, you know, I do get where, you know, obviously you got, like, you know, McDojo life and things like that, which is, you kind of do need it, because if there's guys making outrageous claims, you know, with like chi blasts and, you know, being able to stop people with the power of their mind and all this kind of stuff, it's just like, okay, well, you know, let's not get into the realm of like fantasy. Like, I don't know, if you want to do that stuff, just go play with those like foam swords and dress up like an elf or something, like those LARPers do. Like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't sell it as if it's like this, you know, you're this deadly weapon, you know, this amazing, like, I actually, you know, I obviously done a lot of different martial arts over the years, you know, starting with Taekwondo when I was 10, but then, you know, I moved on to, you know, regular karate, and then did, you know, tried a little bit of Kung Fu, and, you know, I even, you know, found these guys like teaching ninjutsu.
Yeah, right.
And I'm thinking, oh, awesome, man, ninjas. Who the hell doesn't want to be a ninja? Like, that's the coolest thing ever. You know, I'm going to learn how to throw ninja stars and crazy stuff like that. But you know, essentially it was just kind of karate and black gis, really. Like it's, you know, it was no different. There was nothing really special about it. And that's, you know, I think you find that a lot with those sort of ninjutsu dojos, not to throw shade, but you know, they don't tend to be very legit.
Yeah.
They're not sneaking up behind you and like, you know, stabbing you with a katana or something. But but yeah, like I actually did, you know, wind up going and, you know, doing I did kenjutsu and kendo for a while when I was quite young, because I actually really got into, you know, through martial arts, you know, watching the samurai movies and things like that. I actually had an English teacher named Mr. Turner, who, when I was probably about, I think 14 or so, lent me the Akira Kurosawa film, The Seven Samurai, which is, you know, an amazing piece of cinema, even just on its own, if you don't, you know, look at it as a martial artist or anything. But it's something that I was like, this is, oh, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. Actually, anything Kurosawa did, he was sort of the precursor to a lot of what eventually became the spaghetti westerns, like Sergio Leone's Fistful of Dollars was based on Kurosawa's film Yojimbo.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of them, they were pretty much just almost shot for shot rip-offs. So a lot of those early Clint Eastwood movies were really just rip-offs of sort of 1950 samurai movies.
Yeah, right.
You know, not that they're also awesome, like, you know, Clint Eastwood's pretty great, and, you know, Good, the Bad and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, they're all great films. But the, you know, the old school samurai movies like Yojimbo, Sanjuro, so Seven Samurai eventually was made into The Magnificent Seven.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So it was from that I really was getting the interest in, you know, some of the samurai arts, and then, you know, did kendo and everything. And that was an interesting experience, because being 14, I had to like beg my mum to let me do it, because she's like, no, like, I don't want you playing with swords. You're going to like hurt yourself. Like, that's crazy. And eventually I convinced her. And then she took me to go, you know, to go see this place. And the guy was Andrew Melito, who, you know, gone to Japan to study, and he'd sort of developed his own sort of style of swordsmanship. And he actually told me, he's like, oh, well, look, we don't let anyone under 16 train, because by law you need to be 16 in order to purchase any kind of blade, whether it's a knife or a sword or anything like that. So I was like, oh, okay, that's, you know, that's really disappointing. But I sat down with him after watching the class, and you know, he was asking me questions, and I was quite into, you know, the historical elements, and so I knew quite a bit about it. And you know, we had the big discussion, and he was like, oh, okay, like, that's, I just thought this kid wanted to like play with swords or something, and like, you know, didn't have any kind of interest in the cultural aspect or the, you know, the actual martial arts aspect of it. Like, I thought, you know, I thought he was just some rando. And he was really cool about it, and actually said, look, you know, obviously you're really genuinely interested. And normally I would say, look, wait till you're 16. But he said, okay, no, like, why don't you show up next class, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did that for quite a while, and that was really good, because I think I did it for about a year, maybe a bit more. And like, you know, as when you're like 14, a year feels like forever.
100%. Yeah.
And you know, but it was really tough, because the next youngest person in his school was 21. So I'm 14, and then the next youngest person was 21, and they're all grown men. And you know, if you've seen kendo, you're basically wearing armor and then hitting each other with sticks, with bamboo. So yeah, when you're a little 14-year-old and you're trying to fight grown men with sticks and just getting absolutely walloped. Like, I used to come home with just bruises all over me, and you know, just had my like bell rung a couple of times being hit that hard through this through the bogu, the armor.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, like it was really difficult, and it was really disheartening a lot of the time because I just didn't feel like I was getting any better. And then eventually I started making a few friends at school who also did martial arts. My good friend Anthony, who funnily enough was the guy I was mentioning earlier that I make knives with. So he did this martial art Zen Chi-Ryu, which was a sort of amalgam of, you know, karate and kickboxing and stuff that was taught to him by his uncle. And so Zen Chi was pretty, you know, reasonably widespread, especially in Western Sydney around that time, like, you know, from like sort of the 90s through to the 2000s. They're still going, but I think, you know, obviously a lot less interest in the sort of karate-based martial arts these days.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like we became friends, and then I started cross training with his uncle, and eventually when I'd, you know, put on the kendo armor and, you know, get around people who were sort of my level or especially my age, and we tried to muck around with it, I realized from, you know, training with these adult men who were just flogging me all the time, when I got around someone who was actually my size, like I just could go through them like a hot knife through butter. I was like, oh wow, this is great. Like I'm actually winning. And then I realized there's something to that. There's something to really holding yourself to a really difficult standard, like where you're going up against people who are so much better. And, you know, yeah, like you inside your head, you're going, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
This sucks. Like I'm getting absolutely flogged like day in and day out. But then, you know, there's that point where you start to realize like, oh wait, like, no, I am picking this up. It's just that these people are like, they either have, you know, these big physical advantages being, you know, fully grown and a lot stronger. So, you know, I try and block and it'd just crash straight through because it's someone who, you know, outweighed me by like 20 kilos and, you know, they've got grown man strength and I've got, you know, teenage boy strength.
Yeah, right.
So that was really good in the sense of introducing me to the benefits of arduous and difficult training.
It seems like you need that as well, right? Like if you're going to go through something in order to get through the epiphany, which is a realization, and I guess a valuable realization for life, then it always seems like you're having to go through difficult times. In this case, for you, it's like getting smashed by grown men. But I think the gold lies in your willingness and desire to pick up your helmet and all the armor and just keep going back to training and keep getting your ass handed to you and keep coming back and keep coming back. And then before you know it, as you said, like you're looking around and people who are your age and size, you're beating them. So it's like, oh wow, actually I am doing something. And that's very common on the jiu-jitsu mats as well, because students come in and they're complete beginners with no experience whatsoever, and then they're getting beaten up, not even beaten up, but they feel like they're not understanding anything. They don't understand the context. They don't get the steps. The technique feels terrible. They think they're holding other people back around them. And then I tell them, I think we all tell them, hey, it's okay, relax, because you're a beginner and there's been hundreds, if not thousands of beginners that have come in through our doors in exactly the same position that you're in. Like no one expects you to know anything right now. And so they start off and then, you know, the sucky part is there and it gets progressively less sucky. And then, you know, cut back, you know, first stripe, second stripe, and another new beginner comes in who's about a few months like behind them. And then you see the one somewhat beginner helping the brand new person as well. And I think that's a nice little window of acknowledging your progress and how this stuff works, how it is to persist with something in the right ways. The thing that's interesting I think this is character building as well. And that's why I didn't think that you weren't athletic. It's because if you give too much discomfort, if you give too much difficulty at the beginning, I think it takes a special kind of person, not just special, but a very tough 1% kind of person who's going to keep it up and keep coming back. So for example, at the old stomping grounds of SPMA, when I first started, man, there was like a massive attrition rate. For every 10 students that would come in, I feel like, well, I don't know, maybe one would get to blue belt. And that's the case for a lot of different schools as well. But the people who did finish and who did progress through that very difficult time are probably pretty tough dudes. Like, I think I was a pretty tough person. You would have had to kill me to prevent me from coming back the next day. And just like you too, I guess, is that the case for you?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, it's not something that necessarily is inherent. Sorry, my dog's trying to come in to say hi.
Oh, that's your rescue dog, huh?
Yeah, this is Freya.
Freya.
Hey, Freya, yeah, she's a sook, so she always needs attention.
She's a kitty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but like I was saying, yeah, definitely hit the nail on the head. So I think it's not always inherent to have that like sort of toughness and grit, and it is something that in a lot of instances, like, really you need to learn. And to do it the most intelligently, you would slowly over time, just increase intensity and things like that. It's the they talk about it in like strength and conditioning. It's the SAID principle, so specific adaptation to impose demand.
Mm-hmm.
So if you impose a demand that's too great, then you're going to break someone. Like,
yes.
It's just, then they're not going to be able to recover. They're not going to be able to withstand that level of load. But if you, incrementally increase over time, then, same thing as, if you're trying to get, big muscles, or, whether you're trying to like build up mental toughness, like, if you just put someone in the worst, like most horrible situation, like, then they're gonna break, and they're gonna be like, this sucks, I don't want to do it, I'm bailing. And like you said, that's why so many people would quit jiu-jitsu. I think even when done right, jiu-jitsu still potentially can have that high attrition rate, because I think beyond, especially blue belt, like, you get to that point where it's kind of that Dunning-Kruger effect, I believe it is, that you get to that certain apex of knowledge, and then I think a lot of people, they kind of think, oh, I've got my blue belt, I can handle, like, if I got into a fight with like the average person, and that's good enough for me, and I'm kind of over it, and I'm just going to bail. And they pack it in, and then I think you really have to fall in love with the art, and then also too, it's getting to that point where you see that drop in the valley, in that Dunning-Kruger valley, where you realize that you don't know anything at all. You know enough to know you know nothing. And it's really daunting for some people, I think. And then that's another reason to quit, because you go, man, this takes so long and so much effort and time and sweat and blood and, shredded cruciate ligaments in order to get better at. And yeah, like, I think it does take a specific type of person. That's where I saw a quote where, I'm not sure who it was attributed to, but they asked someone like, oh, how long does it take the average person to get to black belt? And they're like, well, the average person will never get to black belt. You're not average if you stick this out that long.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of, I think back then, when I just started, as you said, I wasn't like the average person. I was like a tough kid. I wasn't even tough like around in my social circle, but I had a lot of tenacity. If once I put my mind to something, like, that was it, I was going to get it done, and nothing would ever get in my way. Could ever get in my way. I find it interesting, like, what made you quit the other martial arts then?
Well, I think over, obviously jumping from one to the other, it was, I kind of had this journeyman type mentality where I was just looking for something that made sense to me. And because like I was always like, my focus always was, what was practical, what was, the self-defense. I wanted to learn what worked. And, and look, there's great things.
What was the difference for you? Like, so why for you as a kid, would you not get excited about tricking, for example, or, like the really beautiful kicks of Taekwondo? Like, why was that? I wouldn't say not enough for you, but what was within you that made you want to find more and find the self-defense aspect of it?
I think because I realized that the more simplistic the technique was, the more it tended to work. And, it's like with Taekwondo, like the tricking and the jumping, spinning stuff that looks awesome. And look, don't get me wrong, within the context of Taekwondo, a lot of the time it is super practical because, it is an agreement amongst two people in a sport that and it's within the rules that it works. And it's the same with a lot of martial arts. It's the exact same thing can be said for the sporting elements of jiu-jitsu. If you berimbolo in the streets is the stereotypical example that like you might get your head kicked in or even just simply starting on the ground, or it's like if someone tried to fight you and you I don't know, laid down in front of them and started butt scooting. It's it's probably not going to be the best outcome. And especially too because you're going to play your hand as well. They're going to be like, oh, this guy does that jiu-jitsu stuff. Okay, well, I'm going to step back and kick him in the face or something. So it's I think just being able to recognize like what kind of didn't work and what seemed a little bit fanciful. I mean, and eventually that's why I gave up the like the kendo and everything, because I'm like, look, this is cool and it's fun, and it's great pretending that you're a ninja or a samurai or whatever, but how often am I going to be able to actually employ this in a realistic setting? Granted, if I ever had to like pick up a stick and defend myself, and it was approximately that length, then I feel comfortable with it. I could probably
just kind of holding a sword in your back pocket, the old
exactly. Just carry one around on your back, like just like that scene in Kill Bill when like the bride's got a sword on an airplane for some reason, like they're just cool with her having it, like you're not even allowed to take like nail clippers on a plane, and she's got a katana. I'm like, what the? There's a fair bit of suspension of disbelief going on there. But like I that's where I eventually went on to doing Zenshi-Ryu, and that was because it was very much more, I guess, a practical style of karate. It's very similar to Kyokushin. And a lot of our guys used to compete in the Kyokushin tournaments, and used to do pretty well. Because Tom Slavin, wanted to amalgamate a lot of different elements into his karate. He did boxing and he did kickboxing, and saw Muay Thai and went, hey, like that works. All right, let's use some stuff from that. Like why limit yourself? And I think that's what attracted me to that in the first place, is because a lot of schools back in the day were very derisive of any other style. They're like, nah, that doesn't work. Our stuff works. Like they're shocked, nah, they don't know what they're talking about. And I always kind of could smell the bullshit in that. I'm like, well, no, how do you know? Like, how do you know it doesn't work? Like, why are they doing it then? Why do they do their style if it doesn't have some applicable aspect? So that was something that I did for quite a while, and because a few of my friends from high school were involved in that, and that was and then eventually with my friend's uncle, he ended up transitioning a little bit more away from the the more karate aspects of it, and then we started doing a lot more kickboxing, or even, you know, playing around with more MMA aspects. And, you know, we'd occasionally get on the ground, and, you know, it was pretty, looking back on it now, we did not know what we were doing at all, but at least we were giving it a crack.
For sure.
And that's what eventually led to, and this is over like a great number of years that I did this. And then even started cross training a little bit, doing a little bit of Muay Thai here and there. We had a really great Muay Thai gym near where I lived. That was Jab Out, ran by Jason Lappin.
Okay.
So he was like a massive fixture in Australian Muay Thai. He had a lot of champions under him, and it was, yeah, like it was a pretty cool gym, and getting to go and, you know, do a few.
Pat, I can't hear. Yeah, let's go.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So eventually, when I was, I think I was about 20, 21, I think. That's when I ended up going, and I joined the army for a little bit.
What enticed you to join the army at the time?
I think at that time was, you know, very similar to how I approached martial arts, and I was just looking for a challenge and looking for something to, you know, obviously there's knowledge there, and, you know, I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, I'm into all this martial arts stuff, and, you know, I think that they're kind of related in a sense. Like at that time, I'd, you know, having done kendo and things like that, I'd read, you know, Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, and, you know, that's talking a lot about like stratagem for war. And that's something that I thought, okay, well, you know, maybe I should join the army. It was basically for that and lack of a better idea, I guess.
Yes.
You know, I wasn't really doing much with myself at that point. I'd, you know, finished up high school. I ended up going to TAFE for a little bit for music.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, I couldn't really afford to stay on at TAFE because I was, I had a part-time job working in a bar. And yeah, eventually the work dried up there, and it was really hard trying to find work that fit in with my TAFE schedule. And then I got offered a job working in a warehouse with a mate, and ended up saying, okay, well, you know, I might as well just do that and earn money.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, eventually I was like, well, I'm not really doing much other than just working in this warehouse and, you know, going and doing martial arts every now and then. I was like, okay, well, why don't I actually do something that might mean something?
Yes,
and
right.
That's where I eventually settled on the army.
And so when you joined the army, what were the things that, the similarities, I guess? Like, so how did your martial arts training help you direct your way through the army and through your experiences there?
Definitely just the mental toughness aspect of it.
Yeah, right.
Especially, you know, like basic training and, you know, your IETs, which is your initial employment training. So I joined as a rifleman. So after basic training, which, you know, like it's tough, but it's more just because it's a culture shock. That's probably the hardest aspect of it. You know, it's long days and you're away from, you know, friends and family, but you make friends there, and, you know, it's really just the basic building blocks of, you know, and they basically want to break you down a little bit and build you back up into what they want you to be. Which, you know, which is like a lot of things. You've kind of got to shed your preconceptions at the door, and I think that's a similar thing to being successful at a martial art, because if you go into it, you know, especially having trained elsewhere or done a different style, if you walk in and think you know everything, you're going to really struggle when it comes to actually picking it up, because, you know, you've got this closed-minded view.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's I think Bruce Lee talked about it. It's like you've got to have an empty cup.
Yep.
If you're going to fill it with knowledge, like it can't, be already full, or, if you think it's full. Um, so yeah, that was, that was great, because it was definitely another instance of just learning how to be disciplined and how to be regimented. And, that, was a very, very beneficial thing. Like, I think, and I wouldn't recommend it for everyone. Like, there's definitely people who really struggle in that situation, especially, like if you've got someone who's, yelling at you and telling you what to do all the time. Like, some people just cannot handle that at all. And they melt down. And probably one of the best benefits, I think, is that, to relate it back to a martial arts perspective, that if you've got someone whose job it is to basically try and get under your skin and, I don't know, be rude to you or whatever, like, because they say some pretty messed up things there, like
Push your buttons,
they try to rock. Yeah, absolutely. So once you've been through that and you kind of recognize that it's just like it's words.
Yeah.
That's all it is, and it's not anything that's going to have any lasting effect to you. Like, obviously, look, people can say things to hurt your feelings, and you can have a reaction to that. Like, we're all human, and we all have ego to some varying degree at varying times. And if someone offends that ego, then that's like, you get mad and you go, oh, like, I hate this person, or I want to punch this person, or
something.
Or you want to, or even like you go the opposite way and you go, oh, like, I'm depressed and I want to cry. Like, that's but when you get so used to it, and it kind of you get indoctrinated to it, that the words start to lose meaning, you realize, like, oh, it's just all a big game, and it's who cares? Like, you start realizing, like, no, like, I've got strength internally, I've got self-worth enough to know that even though someone's ripping me apart, like, just telling me I'm the worst thing ever, yeah, okay, well, that's your opinion, that's all good. And from martial arts perspective, like, if someone on the streets, they're swearing at you or whatever, like, you can de-escalate, and that's always really going to be the best action you can take. Otherwise, unless you've got no other choice, because why would you, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of getting into a altercation with someone unless you're actually in danger?
It's funny how you've done like a lifetime of martial arts in order to get to that conclusion, like, just de-escalate and try to avoid, if you can.
Well, that's well, funnily enough, there's even in the Book of Five Rings. So this is like, written in the 1800s by, Miyamoto Musashi, for those that don't know, was a famous swordsman. He fought in, I think it was around 60 duels, and he won every one of them, and in most instances killed his opponent. And even in his book, the Gorin no Sho, which is the Book of Five Rings, and it states in one part of it that the ultimate aim of martial arts is never having to use them. Like, that's the ultimate aim. And it's for someone like that, whose whole fame and notoriety was the fact that, like, he was this amazing swordsman that, had all these duels and basically killed people. But even he turned around and said, hey, like, the ultimate aim of this stuff is that, yeah, you shouldn't use it. There's, I think Jordan Peterson said that basically, if you're capable of violence and you choose not to use violence, that's being peaceful. But if you're incapable of violence, you're not peaceful, you're harmless.
Big difference, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's like having, and if we can even tie it back to, talking about martial arts in terms of like the hero's journey, that sort of archetype of aspiring to use martial arts to be a good person. Like, if you're a good person, you don't want to hurt anyone. Like, why would you ever want to be violent? You know, it doesn't mean you don't have the capacity for it or the knowledge and the proficiency in that. And you know, I think that's the ultimate goal. And I think especially with how we train at High Jiu-Jitsu, I think that's what we teach. It's, if you're attacked, I think, you know, a lot of people, like, you know, even our lower belts very quickly learn how to survive in that situation, and then hopefully either manage to get out of it safely or neutralize the person enough, whether the police can get there or whether they can just get away themselves. Like, it's I think that's, you know, that really like should be the ultimate goal of, I think, all martial arts, or, you know, all people aspiring to be a martial artist, because you can be good at violence and not be a martial artist. Then you're just a thug.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could be someone who goes and like, you know, not to throw shade, but like you can do the old Spanian bush maneuver and like hit some dude in the back of the head with a brick when they're not looking. Like, that's,
Is that what you call it?
Tactically, that is amazing. Tactically, that's great. You don't get any better than like stoving in someone's head with a brick when they're not looking. They're never going to beat you at that.
Yeah.
But does that make you a good person? Hell no. Like, that's not a martial artist. That's, you know, that's using good tactics, but that's not a martial artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So I guess the beautiful part of this is that you're developing the ability, but ultimately it's on you as to whether you use it or not, and it's up to you. And part of the learning process is developing the skills to understand when to use it and when not to. And part of the skills is also knowing every stage of the conflict. So not just the middle part that becomes hand to hand, like the actual fight. You know, like if we talk about self-defense, it's like it's the before as well, like, and just your mindset and your mentality and your decisions that you make on a daily basis about you know, where you're going and how you're talking to people and how you approach people. And it's not simply just the technique. Okay, here's the you know, the punch defense to hip throw. It's everything. It's the whole entire event of pre, during, and then, you know, post event as well. So yeah, really cool, man. Really
Definitely.
cool understanding that.
Well, it's like you said, I think one of the things that gets the absolute least attention in martial arts, or like in martial arts with a view towards conflict, like real conflict, is the pre and post. You know, the signs of the lead up to violence, that's going to save your life more than any technique ever can. Because if you recognize that there's someone who just is looking crazy, and you can even, you know, potentially look at this person and you could make an assumption that, hey, like, certain people just kind of look like they might be carrying a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's you know, there's a lot of subtle cues. There's environmental cues. You know, if you're walking down a well-lit street in a really nice neighborhood, like, yeah, like, okay, like, it's probably not going to be that risky. But if you're, you know, walking through the dodgiest neighborhood out, there's like graffiti everywhere, you know, half of the street lights are broken, you know, and someone comes sauntering up to you just looking shady, then you're like, okay, well, look, there's potentially going to be an issue here. And that's where I think the martial arts helps, because you get that confidence, like we talked about earlier. Like, if you're confident in yourself and you know you have a physical capability, you hold yourself differently. And generally those people who are going to try and rob you, or to, you know, try and do something, you know, basically get from you something that you don't want to part with, whether that's money or your life, they're not going to want a hard target, because those people generally are cowards. Like, they don't want to you know, they're not someone looking for a challenge. They're not someone going to it, because otherwise they'd go to a martial arts gym and they'd say, hey, look, I'm going to go roll with the black belt there and just get absolutely owned for like multiple rounds. And, you know, that's just how they're going to do it. Like, but no, they're going to look for the small, the weak, the person who looks nervous in that situation. But if you're looking around, you're scanning your environment, you're you know, you're confident in the way you hold yourself and the way you walk, they're going to look at it and they're just going to go, you know what, too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this person's aware. They look confident. They look fit. That's a big one. Like, you know, that's, you know, if you do jiu-jitsu or you train, like, you know, you're holding your head high. You know, you've got some self-confidence and some self-respect. And then even if they do decide to come up to you, you probably got the wherewithal and the intelligence to say, okay, well, you know, look, here's my wallet, man. Like, you know, I'm not going to, like, if it's your wallet, yeah, you get a new wallet, cancel your cards, you know, you get a new phone. But if you do have to obviously, you know, defend yourself, then you've got that capability, and that's what you're confident in.
Yeah. And I think the distinguishing point here is you're making the decision. Like, someone's not going to force you to give their wallet. You're going to look at the situation and say, well, I can do something here. Of all the different options that I can see in front of me, the least risky and probably most safe option right now, most effective option, is to give this wallet over. Okay, fine. But it's not, I think that what the martial arts helps us do is have the ability to make that decision. Whereas if I didn't have martial arts and I was scared of the person who asked me for my wallet, then I'd just kind of shake and give them anything and everything, you know? So, and I think that's where the power, that's where the confidence comes in, as you said. Like, it's just how you carry yourself. Like, when I walk around, like, it's a matter of, if shit hits the fan, I have an idea about what to do right here. And that is different to the thought of, oh shit, if anything happens right now, I'm completely stuffed. I was having a conversation. I always have conversations with people, with strangers, about jiu-jitsu. It always goes there. And I was at the PCYC open day at Martin Place. And this guy was watching us grapple and practice our self-defense techniques and stuff. And he goes, we had this conversation. He goes, look, man, I'm really interested in learning something because I've got a girlfriend now. And he looked quite old. He looked middle-aged. So it was a kind of new thing. He had his new missus there. And he's like, and I always think about it, if I'm ever walking with her and if anybody ever comes up to me, I have no idea what to do. And it scares me. He's like, I'd love to find out and just have an idea about how to defend myself if anybody was to come up to me or my partner right now and want to start anything. So he looked scared just thinking about that and just knowing that he didn't have the option. The funny thing about it is people who don't train and have that confidence, you know, that's a lot of times it's a false sense of confidence, which is what I had when I was a teenager growing up. I just thought I had this big right hand that would just KO everybody. But that's I guess what the jiu-jitsu path, the martial arts path gets from you, that you get from it, I should say as well. My question is, man, like, we've spoken about toughness quite a bit. How do you relate this toughness, this mental toughness, to the mats? It's not, I guess, like a layman, an uneducated person would say, hey, if you're really tough on the jiu-jitsu mats, have my arm, put it in an armbar. I'm not going to tap because I'm tough. I'm going to just grip my teeth and I'm just going to bear it and then break it. Just break it because I'm a tough guy. And we know from so many years on the mats that that's not the case. So in your opinion, like, how can you take this mental toughness that you've developed over the years, and then how do you apply that in the jiu-jitsu life journey?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. And look, I think it's interesting because it definitely plays into when I first came to higher jiu-jitsu, and when I found you guys on Google, because I was looking for jiu-jitsu that was self-defense oriented, because that's definitely my my focus. And like you saw when I like first started with you guys, like,
I
you know,
remember the
because
call we had.
I
That was the best call. Like I got
yeah.
off that call and I was like, this guy's going to sign up and we're going to have a whole bunch of fun together. I can tell with those calls.
Oh, I'm glad it came across that way. It's
Yeah.
no, because I was super pumped to start, because I was like, you know what, I think I've finally found where I'm meant to be. And this is you know, and this was a difficult thing to transition to, even though it was the right decision, because, you know, I came in, I already had my blue belt, and, you know, essentially, you know, you took me aside and you said, hey man, like it's awesome, like, you know, yeah, definitely you've got your blue belt, like, you know, I recognize you have been doing jiu-jitsu, you do have that level of skill, I'm not you know, denying that, but then also, like, we've got a very specific curriculum, and, you know, I'd like you to work up to doing the blue belt test, and just grading under our association. And I was like, okay, like, I'm like, all right, like, you know, cool. At first, like, in my head, I'm just thinking like, oh shit, does John think that I'm not deserving of the blue belt that I've already got? And, like, you know, there's always going to be that little like tickle of ego in the back. But eventually, like, I just looked at it and I'm like, well, yeah, like, after rolling with some of the guys there, like, even seeing, like, I remember specifically having a roll with Brad, and I was, and that's the thing, like, I'm probably like, I'm a bit bigger than Brad, like, you know, Brad's not like a tiny guy or anything like that, but, like, I'm a bit bigger, you know, and, you know, it's funny, you know, like you said before, like, you found it strange me talking about when I wasn't athletic, because I came into the gym with just a ton of athleticism, and, you know, I'm trying to like cartwheel past guards, and, you know, doing all this stuff like that. And but I remember rolling with Brad and just getting so frustrated, because he would just like really systematically break down and stifle any athleticism from me. And I remember specifically him getting on my back and then, you know, just really struggling. I'm like, holy crap, this guy's on my back now. You know, I'm like, how did this even happen? I'm like, shit, like shit. And seeing the level of some of the guys in the gym, and even some of the guys that were, you know, still on their white belts, and just going, man, there's something here. There's something to the curriculum. And look, it wasn't easy to sort of admit that at first, because then it required me kind of going back to the drawing board with my jiu-jitsu overall. And we've had many conversations over the, you know, I think I've trained with you guys now for like a bit over 3 years. And I think there's going to be many more conversations to come, because like ego still exists. Like, you know, there's times where I used to just try and rely on athleticism and that mental toughness. And I'm like, nah, I'm not going to tap. Nah, I'm just going to go as hard as possible. You know, this is how it's got to be done. And look, like, you know, mental toughness is great, and having toughness and grit on the mats is great, but not all the time. Like, it's something that, you know, I've really come to the realization, especially in probably the past year or so, that I'd rather have that as a break glass in case of emergency. Like, you know, I'll you know, I've got enough mental toughness that if I'm ever having to fight for my life, you know, for real, then yeah, cool. Like, you know, break my arm, do whatever. Like, you know, those are the moments for that, you know, that aggression and that, you know, super athletic, like, you know, because, you know, you're fighting for your life, like, of course. But when it comes to training, you know, learning how to be calm and relaxed on the mats, and then also to accept techniques. You know, if I'm just fighting, you know, tooth and nail to not end up in side control, and I end up side control anyway, I'm in the same position I would have been had I just accepted it, but I'm twice as tired.
Yes.
And then, you know, my counterattacks or my, you know, my frames that I'm trying to establish to make space are going to be harder or weaker. Like, it's more difficult, you know, to actually use proper technique, because I'm tired. and I'm frustrated. And then, you know, you allow emotion to start creeping in because, you know, that heart rate kicks up, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got that fight or flight
Yep. Been there.
kicking in. And yeah, definitely. So that's probably the biggest thing, you know, transferring that mental toughness and that grit to the mats is learning that you don't have to use it. It exists in your head. Like, it's a very, you know, internal thing that you can always reach in, and it's a font of energy and of motivation that you can tap into. But at the same time, like, you know, you always want to aspire to be using superior technique and mechanics, you know, to remaining calm even in the worst positions. That's what I've really learned, and that's definitely the I think the better way of doing it, because there's times where mental toughness just leads you down a bad path.
Well, it's really interesting that you've said this, because we're talking about the same thing, mental toughness. But on the one hand, people, like, I think it's a matter of where you apply it, where you apply that card. And for some people, I think I mean, personally, I think it could be a lot of things, but this idea of mental toughness is staying calm when you're in a very difficult situation, not exploding at any point in time when the going gets tough, not just trying to spaz and just erupt and force yourself on the situation. It's more a matter of, okay, the cards are stacked against me right now. Let me sit back. Let me have the mental toughness to not stress myself out and not get really worked up, and slowly work my way out of it, and slowly look to, millimeter by millimeter, find a path that will help me in the future. I think to your point as well, like as you said, man, like from a coach's point of view, like we have the conversation sometimes, and then I have other conversations with other students. And sometimes for you, sometimes it's like, hey, Pat, try to focus, you know, like take away the athleticism a little bit is what we've spoken about before. For some other people, it's like, hey, man, you got to kind of like get a bit more comfortable being in a bad spot, you know, like just sometimes I have to pump them up a little bit and make them a little bit more durable, let's say, and a little bit more tough in that way. So I guess from a coach's point of view,
yeah, you want to have a little bit of mongrel about you.
You do need that, and as you said before, that's what jiu-jitsu helps you with as well. You can't have that. You can't not have any mongrel. Like, there needs to be that little bit of mongrel, and I think what has to happen is you need to discern the times where the mongrel comes out of you and where it doesn't. And I think that's what you've done really well. Like, that was the kind of premise of our conversation. It was like, don't always bring that mongrel out, you know, like have technical solutions to technical problems. And then that's going to help you at the times when you do definitely need to bring the mongrel out. And I think for you, man, like, it's so much easier for you to understand that, because you've been in these situations, you've been in the army, you know, you've done the hardest things that people do. And that can help you in future. Just work out where to apply your skills, like which skills to apply in which situations.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits, and you know, that's why you know, look, even when I moved back to Penrith for a little bit, and I was still catching the train into the city to train at higher jiu-jitsu, because there's definitely something special about, you know, the culture at our school. And I think it's, you know, I'd even go so far as saying, like, you know, going beyond culture, it's almost like DNA. It's something that's sort of being inherently built into everyone who comes in and trains, and, you know, especially as they progress through the belts. It's like this sort of universal understanding everyone has that, you know, we're there to collaborate, and we're there to you know, lift each other up. You know, there was, you know, we all use that quote, the rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah.
It's and it's great because, you know, one thing that you do really learn is that jiu-jitsu isn't just a way to, you know, be tough or to, you know, or even like to the outsider's perspective, like, or martial arts as a whole. Like, it's not about being violent. It is about building you up as a person. It's also building up the people around you. It's, you know, it's a crucible in which we're all forging ourselves to be the best versions that we can be of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've got going that's really quite unique, because I think that it is hard not to throw shade anywhere. I'm not going to say any names. Like, I've trained at, I've been doing jiu-jitsu now for, you know, about, I think it's like almost, it's probably like 7 years.
Wow.
You know, and that's like 3 of those have been at higher. So obviously I've trained elsewhere, but there is something really inherently special in the, I'll say it again, the DNA of our school, and that it passes through everyone, you know. And I feel like it's being sort of filtered down through, you know, Professor Sauer into you, to, you know, to guys like Oscar, Danny, Maddie, like, you know, and then out into everyone else. Like, it's, you know, it's great, and it's something that's really good to see, and it's really helped me overall, because, you know, there's definitely been times where, you know, the mental toughness does waver, and you think, oh, you know, like, I've had time off due to injury. I've, you know, even just had time off, you know, I'll take a week off here and there if I'm like feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's having that aspect in our school where everyone's collaborative, everyone's aspiring to something better, that keeps me coming back, and that's probably kept me training when there was times that I might have looked at, you know, quitting or taking a long time off.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So
And that's that.
go for it.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, and that's like, I think that's really the true aspect of mental toughness for jiu-jitsu. It's just staying in it and just having a positive attitude, and a positive attitude for everyone around you, and just looking at it for what it is. Like, it's a gift that we get to do it, and it's, you know, and it sucks for us right now. We're all in lockdown, but it doesn't take away how awesome jiu-jitsu is and how great it's going to be when we all get to jump on the mats again and, you know, slap hands, bump fists, and then, you know, simulate murder on each other.
Can you imagine that those first grapples? They're gonna be so beautiful, so amazing.
Yeah, it's.
I agree with you, like, wholeheartedly, that it's like culture of the school isn't the quotes that are on the wall. You know, they're not what the teacher says for the most part. They're not what the rules are of the school. Like, it's inherent. And I'm creating a bit of a coaching course as well, and like on how to build a culture of a school, and I'm trying to put that into words, and it's difficult. Like, there's something there, and it's inherent in every student, and their intentions of coming in, and of their attitude, and of so much is involved in having a school like ours. And a big part of it is having legends like you, man, like you, and as you said, Maddie and Oscar and Danny, and everybody who not just those boys, but, you know, even the white belts who have been training for a couple of weeks. Like, everybody makes the school what it is, and I love it. And to your point, like, I
100%.
think the mental toughness is that, like, that's a big part of it, just staying on the mats, because you will face adversity. Like, our school is guiding how much adversity at each time. So we're using the SAID principle, you know, like, we're kind of giving you just a little bit of, at a time, so you can eat it up and keep coming back for more. Sometimes, you know, there's too much, sometimes there's not enough. And I think it's in your ability to keep going, because that's what's going to get you to not be an average person, and be a more than average person, and get to the black belt. And yeah, man, in 3.5 years, I've seen so much progress in you, man, like on the mats, off the mats. And I think that's such a big part of jiu-jitsu. So, hey, thanks so much, Pat, for jumping on. I know you had to run off. That's like a while ago. So Thank you, man. Thanks for this chat. I appreciate it. Let's both miss jiu-jitsu together. And in no time,
Yeah, man, definitely.
in no time, we'll use our jiu-jitsu skills to get us through this lockdown. And then in no time, we'll be back choking each other out and loving it as well.
Definitely, mate.
Pat, thanks so much, buddy. I appreciate it. Chat soon. We'll do
Thanks
this
for having
again.
me on.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks,
definitely.
man.
Sounds good.
I'll see ya.
See you, Johnny.